Since President Sadat made peace with Israel, Egypt counted many Arab states among its enemies. Perhaps the greatest, its neighbor to the west, Libya. And in the Libyan capital of Tripoli today, the streets gave way to mobs celebrating word of the assassination. Thousands of Libyans waving the green flag of their country, cheering the mention of their leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. The Libyan strongman repeatedly has called for Sadat's overthrow by whatever means necessary. There also were celebrations, although reportedly much smaller, in the capitals of Syria and Iraq, two other so-called rejectionist enemies of Egypt. And in Beirut, Palestinians and leftist militiamen took to the streets of the Lebanese capital, firing their guns in celebration. Several organizations, both Egyptian and Lebanese-based, claimed responsibility for the assassination. However, leftist sources tell our Larry Pentak in Beirut that the attack on President Sadat was internal and not linked to any outside group. Exiled Egyptian General Sadruddin el-Shazali, whose group was one of those claiming responsibility, called late this afternoon for the Egyptian people, police and army to overthrow the government left by the assassinated Anwar Sadat. The assassination of President Sadat is a nightmare come true for Israel, which now must wrestle with the difficult question of what effect this will have on the peace process. Bob Faw is in Israel.
No other foreign government had staked more on Anwar Sadat than the government of Menachem Begin, and no other stands to lose as much from his death. So tonight, Prime Minister Begin said all of Israel is in mourning over the man Begin said was murdered by the enemies of peace.
I therefore today lost not only a partner to the peace process, but also a friend. We hope that the peace process, despite the cruel act of its enemies, will continue, as we know President Sadat would wish with all his heart.
Even though Begin resolved tonight to reach the goal he and Mr. Sadat had set, he knows how fragile the peace process is and how much harder now it will be to achieve. Already, opponents of Camp David here are saying the assassination proves the Mideast is not ready for peace and that Israel should postpone its withdrawal from the Sinai, scheduled for April. Some Israelis who had vowed not to leave their homes in the Sinai are now expected to dig in even deeper, making the job of selling the peace at home that much tougher for the Prime Minister. And along the West Bank, radical Palestinians were described as pleased with news of the murder. Some reportedly even handed out candy. So here, where there is shock and confusion, there is also fear about what a change in the Egyptian government might mean. Former Foreign Minister Moshe Dayan was no doubt speaking for many Israelis when he said, "No one can take Sadat's place. This changes the whole picture." Bob Fall, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
Fears of a possible disruption of Middle East oil supplies in the wake of President Sadat's assassination raised the value of gold and the dollar on world markets today. On New York stock markets, where prices were mixed, there was a special demand for the stock of oil companies with resources outside the Middle East.